Here is a thought to hold as you settle in tonight. When Cleopatra looked at the pyramids, they were already more ancient to her than she is to you. The Great Pyramid was over 2,000 years old before she was born. Its builders as remote from her as the Roman Empire is from your century. And the Egypt she ruled was itself the last chapter of a civilization that had, by then, been getting up with the sun, baking its bread, sailing its river, and sleeping on its cool rooftops for longer than almost any way of life human beings have ever sustained. Tonight you are going deep into the heart of those quiet thousands of years, to one ordinary village in the reign of a great pharaoh, for one peaceful day beside the oldest and most generous clock on earth. The river. So settle into your bed, let your shoulders sink, let your hands rest wherever they are comfortable. There is nothing to remember tonight and nothing to solve. If you drift off before the day is done, that is exactly what this story is for. You wake up in an ancient Egyptian village, and you wake up under the stars. Because in Egypt, in the warm half of the year, which is most of the year, nobody with a roof sleeps under it. They sleep on it. The flat mud brick roof of every house in this village is its best bedroom, and you are lying on a woven reed mat on yours, under a linen sheet, in air that is finally, in the deep of the night, let go of the day's heat and turned soft and cool and faintly green smelling, the breath of the river half a mile away. Around you, on every roof down the lane, the village is sleeping the same way. Whole families laid out under the enormous sky, and the sky itself is staggering. The desert sky of 3,000 years before electric light, so thick with stars that the darkness is the exception. And straight over your head runs the broad glowing river of the Milky Way, which the people around you call the heavenly Nile, the river of the sky, mirroring the one below. And lying here between the two rivers, one of water and one of stars, is simply how this village has gone to sleep for 1,000 years. Beneath your neck, instead of a pillow, is the object every visitor to this century puzzles over, and every Egyptian swears by: a headrest, a smooth curved cradle of wood on a small pedestal that holds your head lifted while you sleep on your side, keeping your ear off the mat and the cool air moving under your neck. And it looks impossible, and it is, after the first night or two, entirely comfortable. And it is the single most common piece of furniture in Egypt, carved plain for farmers and inlaid with ebony for nobles. And people are so attached to their own that they take them traveling, and in the end, they take them further than that. Somewhere below in the dark lane, a dog investigates something and thinks better of it. A donkey, dreaming, briefly disagrees with the dream. On the next roof, a child resettles against its mother without waking. And underneath every sound, so constant you have to choose to hear it, the sound this whole civilization is built on, the soft, wide, patient slide of the river in its bed, going north in the dark, carrying the whole country gently downstream toward morning. Let the last hour of the night tell you where you are, because this village is a very particular and rather wonderful place. It is a village of craftsmen, built at the desert's edge, where the black land meets the red. Those are the real names, the ones the Egyptians themselves use. The black land, Kemet, is the ribbon of deep dark soil along the river, renewed every year by the flood, so fertile it practically farms itself. And it is the whole living country, nowhere more than a few miles wide. The red land, Deshret, is everything else, the clean dead endless desert that begins, in most places, as abruptly as a shoreline. You can stand in this village with one foot on soil that grows 2 crops a year, and the other on sand that has grown nothing since the world began. Egypt is not really a country in the way your century means it. It is a river with banks, 700 miles long, and an afternoon's walk wide, a single green thread laid across the largest desert on earth, and every Egyptian lives their whole life within sight of both the thread and the desert, the black and the red, the living and the eternal, side by side every single day, which explains a great deal about how they think. The men of this village are the tomb builders, the stone cutters, plasterers, draftsmen, and painters who work in the great valley in the cliffs nearby, cutting and decorating the eternal houses of kings. And because their work is precious and skilled, the village is comfortable, well-fed, and, most usefully for you tonight, one of the best documented ordinary places in the entire ancient world. These people wrote everything down on flakes of smooth limestone and broken pottery, and the dry desert kept every scrap, their laundry lists, their work rosters, their loan agreements, their jokes, their notes to the neighbors, and so we know this village, house by house and name by name, better than we know most villages of 300 years ago. When tonight's story tells you what these people ate and argued about and did on their days off, it is not guessing. They told us themselves in their own handwriting, and the desert saved the notes. The village is a tight-packed rectangle of white and honey-colored houses along one main lane, walled, neat, and profoundly at home in its landscape, because it is built of the landscape. Every wall around you is mud brick, and mud brick is the quiet material genius of this entire civilization. Because consider what the river gives this valley every year, along with the water and the soil. It gives mud, perfect building mud, silt and clay in exactly the proportions a wall wants, delivered free to every doorstep by the flood. And the Egyptians long ago worked out the recipe that turns it into a house. River mud, chopped straw from the harvest, a little sand, trodden together by foot in a pit. The same dance in every village in the valley, then pressed into simple wooden molds, 4 boards and a handle, and turned out in rows to dry, not fired, never fired, just laid out under the one resource Egypt has never once run short of, the sun. And in a week, the sun has baked each brick hard, and a team of 2, 1 molding, 1 carrying, can make several hundred in a day, and the walls go up. And a mud brick house in this climate is not a poor house. It is the correct house, and your century's engineers studying it agree. Those thick earthen walls do exactly what the 6-foot turf of the north does, and what the adobe of other deserts does. They store the night. All day they drink the heat slowly into their mass, keeping the rooms cool while the street bakes. And all night they let it go again, keeping the rooms mild while the desert outside drops toward cold, a one-day thermal tide, absorbed and released, forever, with no moving parts and no fuel. The house breathes in summer and out in winter on a 12-hour delay, and it was made from the ground it stands on by the family it shelters for nothing. And the word itself has a journey worth following. The Egyptian word for brick, jebet, was carried down the centuries into the Egyptian of later ages, and from there into Arabic as al-tub. The brick and Arabic carried it along North Africa and into Spain, where it became adobe, and Spain carried it across an ocean to the deserts of the New World. So that when your century says adobe, it is saying, at the end of a 4,000-year relay race, the plain Egyptian word for the sun-dried brick your head is resting above right now. Some words are tools that never wear out. The brick went around the world inside its own name. Your house below you is the village standard, and the standard is dignified. 4 rooms in a line, front to back. A small entrance room off the lane, whitewashed, with the household shrine in its niche. Behind it, the main room, the heart of the house, its roof carried higher on a painted wooden column, so that clear story gaps under the roofline pull a permanent gentle draft through the house. Another piece of engineering wearing the costume of simplicity. Off the main room, a small bedroom, and behind everything the kitchen, open to the sky at the back, with its dome-shaped bread oven and its grinding bench and its stairs, the stairs everyone actually uses, up to the roof, where the family lives on summer evenings and sleeps on summer nights, and where you are lying now as the east begins at last, at the rim of the desert, to pale. Dawn in Egypt is fast and glorious. There is no long gray northern twilight here. The sky above the eastern cliffs goes from indigo to rose to a blazing clean gold in the time it takes the village to fold its bedding, and then the sun itself stands up over the desert rim, sudden and whole, and the first heat of it lands on your skin like a friendly hand, and the whole valley turns its colors on at once, the river flashing silver, the black land igniting green, the red land glowing like its name, the white village walls going bright as linen. The Egyptians greet this moment every single morning with prayers of genuine gladness, because their theology and their landscape agree completely. The sun's return is not a metaphor here. The night desert is genuinely deathly. The day valley is genuinely paradise, and every dawn the whole country watches creation happen again, on schedule. Down in the kitchen, the fire is already awake, and so is the grandmother who woke it. She keeps the coals overnight in a clay pot under an ash blanket, embers being embers in every century you have ever slept through. And this morning, as every morning, she has knelt in the blue dark and breathed them back into flame under the porridge pot without one wasted motion. 4 decades of mornings behind her hands. No part of her attention required. All of it available for supervising the entire household simultaneously, which is her actual profession. It is not remarkable, any of it, and by now you know exactly what that kind of unremarkable means, and what it is worth, and how the whole ancient world runs on it. But before breakfast, come to the roof edge, because the village below is performing its dawn, and it is worth watching whole. Doors opening onto the lane, the water jars going out on shoulders and heads, the goats organizing a protest, the first donkeys setting off for the fields with their drivers still finishing their bread, smoke rising from 60 kitchens straight up into the still gold air, and every roof around you shedding its sleepers, mats rolled, sheets folded, families climbing down their stairs into the day. And past the village wall, on the raised paths between the fields, the farmers walking out to their morning's work through the young flax and the green emmer wheat, into a landscape so lush, so watered, so absurdly generous that the Greek travelers who see it centuries from now will invent a phrase for the whole country that has never been bettered. Egypt, they will write home, is the gift of the river. Breakfast, and every other meal in Egypt, stands on 2 legs, and the 2 legs are really one, because bread and beer here are the same craft wearing 2 hats. The bread comes first, and it is everywhere, in dozens of shapes, flat rounds and tall cones and plaited loaves, baked from emmer wheat, ground fresh on the household quern. And Egypt eats bread the way the sea holds fish, constantly, universally, at every meal, in quantities that startle visitors. And the beer is bread's sister, brewed in every kitchen from the same grain, lightly fermented, thick, cloudy, mildly sweet, nourishing, and gentle. Less a drink in your century sense than a pourable food, and it is drunk daily by everyone. The workman at the tomb, the priestess at the temple, the children with their supper, exactly as the ale flowed through the medieval village and the small beer through the colonial kitchen, and the logic has not changed in 3,000 years. The river is for boats, and the beer is for drinking, and the brewing makes it safe, and nobody in this valley has ever needed the word for teetotal. But here bread and beer are more than food. They are money. Egypt in this age runs without coins entirely. Coins have not been invented anywhere yet, and the whole economy is paid in rations, reckoned in bread and beer, the way your century reckons in currency. The workmen of this village draw their monthly wages in sacks of grain, loaves, beer, fish, vegetables, and oil, delivered from the state stores. Generous wages, for these are valued men, enough grain that a good craftsman's surplus becomes his savings, traded on for linen or a copper tool or a fine headrest. Prices in the village accounts are written in loaves and jars. A goat is worth so many. A day of a donkey's labor, so many. The scribes track it all, and the whole system runs on the thing the river guarantees, which is that there will always, always be grain. And so the smell rising from the village this morning, 60 kitchens baking and brewing at once, warm bread and sweet mash on the golden air, is not just breakfast. It is, quite literally, the treasury, being minted fresh, every morning, in every house, at once. And now, plainly, the passage this journey always owes you, because Egypt comes wrapped in a myth your century learned from the movies, and the truth is both better and more complicated. The myth says the great monuments were built by armies of slaves under the whip. The record, the abundant, written, excavated record, says otherwise. The pyramid builders and the tomb craftsmen were paid workers, villages of them, exactly like this one, drawing rations, keeping accounts, taking days off, treated by the standards of their world as skilled and valuable people. And we have their pay records, their bakeries, their medical care, and their proud graffiti to prove it. The great works of Egypt were built by Egyptians who were compensated for it, many of them farmers doing seasonal labor for the state in the months when the flood covered their fields and there was no farming to do anyway. A labor tax paid in muscle, resented sometimes, dodged sometimes, but a world away from the whip-driven epic in the films. And yet, having corrected the myth, honesty must finish the job. And you know by now how this journey finishes it. Slavery did exist in Egypt. Household slaves, captives of the border wars, people who fell into bondage through debt, and their unfreedom was real. And no accounting of this sunny valley is complete without them standing in it. It was not the engine of the economy here as it was in Rome or the plantations. The engine here was the free peasant and the flood, but it was present, woven in, accepted by everyone whose opinion survives. And the fact that a civilization could be this humane in its labor records and still hold people as property is not a contradiction to explain away. It is the oldest lesson of this whole journey through the centuries, told one more time in one more beautiful place. Every warm-lit human world has shadows sitting at its table, and the honest traveler holds the warmth and the shadow in the same steady hand and keeps walking and keeps looking and lets both be true. The village, meanwhile, has finished its breakfast, and the workmen are gathering in the lane with their tools and their bread for the walk up the desert path. And today, because the records say you may, you are going with them. The walk to the Great Valley takes an hour, up a worn path over the desert shoulder, and it is one of the finest commutes in history. The green world sinking behind, the silence of the red land opening ahead, the cliffs turning gold as the sun climbs, and the gang of workmen strolling it the way workmen stroll everywhere, in twos and threes, unhurried, mid-conversation, lunches slung, somebody's new sandals being mocked, and their working calendar, when you learn it, will sound strangely familiar and strangely generous at once. The Egyptian month is 30 days, divided into 3 weeks of 10 days each. And in this village of royal craftsmen, the rhythm of the 10-day week is 8 days on and 2 days off, a weekend, 3,000 years before the word. And that is before the festival days, of which the Egyptian calendar is magnificently full, so that a workman here rests more days in the year than his equivalents will in the mills of the 19th century. We know this again because they wrote it down, and among the limestone flakes the desert kept are the attendance registers of gangs exactly like this one, name by name, day by day, with the absences and the reasons for the absences, and the reasons are the best documents in Egypt. Absent, embalming his brother. Absent, his wife was bleeding. Absent, stung by a scorpion. Absent, brewing beer, which appears so often and is accepted so calmly that brewing day was evidently as legitimate as illness, and one register records a man absent because he was building his house, and another immortally absent, drinking with so-and-so, written down by the scribe without comment, because the scribe was going to want the same courtesy eventually. 33 centuries before your century invented the personal day, this village had it, filed it, and kept the receipts. The work itself in the Great Valley is patient, skilled, and cool, which surprises everyone. The tomb corridors run deep into the cliff, and deep rock keeps one temperature all year, so the painters and carvers work in comfortable shade by the light of oil lamps, whose wicks are salted, the records note, to keep them from smoking and spoiling the fresh paint. Draftsmen grid the walls in red, masters correct in black, carvers follow the lines, painters follow the carvers, grinding their colors from the desert itself, ochres and malachite, and the famous blue that Egypt invented, the first manufactured pigment on earth. The work is unhurried on principle, because it is for eternity, and eternity of all clients can wait. Leave the workmen to their eternity and walk back down into the living valley, because the black land in the growing season is the other masterpiece, and the morning is its best hour. The fields are small and brimming, divided by low earthen banks into a green checkerboard, emmer wheat and barley in their thick young stands, beans and lentils and onions in their beds, flax in its blue-flowered acres, and everywhere binding it all together, the water standing in the basins, sliding in the ditches, being lifted field by field by the instrument whose silhouette is the signature of this entire landscape, the shaduf. It stands at the ditch side like a patient waiting bird, a long pole balanced on a crossbar, a leather bucket hanging from the long end, a great ball of dried mud counterweighting the short end, and its genius is the counterweight, because the counterweight does the work. The farmer pulls the empty bucket down to the water, which is easy, the weight helping him the moment the bucket fills, and then the mud ball sinks, and the full bucket rises on its own, lifted by physics, and he swings the pole and tips the water into the channel above, and pulls down, and lets rise and swings and tips in a slow rocking rhythm a man can keep up all morning precisely because the machine, not his back, is doing the lifting. One man, one pole, one ball of mud, raising 100 buckets an hour from the river's level to the fields, hour after hour, ditch after ditch, and the same design will still be rocking over the same river 3,000 years from tonight, unimproved, because there was nothing to improve. And listen to the sound of it. All along the valley, dozens of shadufs working out of sight of each other, each with its own creak and slap and gush, overlapping down the morning like frogs. The sound of the river being persuaded, politely, a bucketful at a time, uphill into the wheat. The Nile does the flooding once a year, wholesale. The shaduf does the retail, every day, by hand, and between the two of them, they water the gift. And the year those fields live by is the strangest, simplest, most sensible year in this whole journey, because the Egyptian year does not have 4 seasons. It has 3, and all 3 are the river. First comes Akhet, the inundation, the miracle season, when the Nile, fed by rains and mountains no Egyptian has ever seen, swells and rises and spills gently over its banks, and the whole valley becomes a shining sheet of water out of which the villages stand on their mounds like islands, and the boats sail over the drowned fields, and the river lays down over everything it covers, a fresh black film of fertile silt, a new country delivered annually, no plowing under manure, no resting fields in fallow, none of the careful soil arithmetic every other farmer in every other century of this journey has had to master. Egypt's soil is simply replaced every year, free, by the flood, which is why this valley has been farmed continuously, without exhausting itself, for longer than anywhere else on earth. Then the water withdraws, and Pare begins, the emergence, the going down of the river, and the coming up of the green, the plowing of the soft new mud, the scattering of the seed, with flocks of sheep driven across the fields to tread it in, and then the long mild growing months, the season you are standing in this morning, the valley at its deepest green, and then Shemu, the harvest, the dry season, the whole village in the wheat with sickles, the grain to the threshing floors, the oxen treading it out, the winnowers tossing it gold into the wind exactly as the colonial barn will toss it 3,000 years from now, the granaries filling, the taxes assessed, and the land baking slowly harder and dustier, while everyone watches the river begin, once again, to rise. Flood, growth, harvest, rise, green, gold. 3 beats, 1 river, forever. The farmers of this valley never invented a rain dance because it never rains here worth mentioning and the crops come anyway. They invented instead the Nilometer, staircases of marked stone descending into the river at the temples, where the priests read the flood's height like a gauge. Because the reading is the year's entire forecast, a low flood means hunger, and a high flood means havoc. And the good flood, the one the whole country prays for by name, means everything, and the tax rates themselves are set from the marks on those stairs. 1 number read off a staircase, and the whole nation knows its year. Your century has never had a forecast half so clean. On the way back to the village, the path runs beside the flax field, and the flax field is where this journey's oldest thread picks up again, wearing new fibers. Because Egypt does not dress in wool, Egypt dresses in linen, and linen begins here, in these slender green stems with their sky-blue flowers, pulled up whole at harvest, roots and all, retted in the ditches until the fibers loosen, beaten, combed and then spun. And spinning is spinning in every century you have ever visited, the spindle turning, sinking, wound turning, in the doorways of this village exactly as it turns in the Roman colonnade, and will turn in the medieval doorway and the crofter's evening, except that the thread here is flax, fine as hair, and the weavers of Egypt take it to the great horizontal looms and make of it the lightest, coolest, most sensible cloth ever set against a hot climate, and the finest of it, the royal grades. They weave so sheer the records call it woven air. And linen is the correct answer to Egypt, the way turf was the correct answer to the north. It breathes. It wicks. It is cool to the skin at noon and enough at night. It washes endlessly. It bleaches whiter every year it is used, and the whole country wears it. From the farmer's plain kilt to the noble's pleated gowns. 1 plant, 1 cloth, 1 climate, solved. The wool of the sheep, which Egypt has plenty of, is for blankets and the northern winters of other people. Here the sheep are for treading seed, and the flax is for wearing, and a village in clean white linen against green fields and blue sky is one of the handsomest sights of the entire ancient world, and knows it. And when the linen is finally, after years of wearing and washing and mending and handing down, too worn even for Egypt, it is still not finished, because old linen is the wrapping of eternity itself, and every household saves its softest rags against the day the embalmers will need them, which is a sentence that sounds dark in your century and is entirely domestic in this one. The same cloth that swaddled the baby and dressed the bride keeping. At the very end, its last appointment. And there is a completeness in that, cradle to eternity in one weave, that this civilization, which thinks in circles rather than lines, finds not morbid, but deeply satisfying. By the time you reach the village, the sun has climbed to its full authority, and Egypt does what every wise hot country in this journey does at this hour, and did it first. It goes into the shade and stays there. The midday meal is light and quick. Bread, onions, a handful of dates, beer, taken in the breeze of the main room, where the clear-story draft slides through, and then the village settles into the long-shaded stillness of the early afternoon. The lanes emptying, the work pausing, the animals folding themselves into slivers of shadow with the geometric precision of creatures who have made a science of it. The great rest of the hot countries is already ancient here, already perfected, and the deep main rooms of the mud brick houses, holding last night's coolness in their walls right on schedule, are its ideal instrument. Find your mat in the main room, in the moving air under the painted column, and give the hour what it asks for, which is nothing. The house works around you at its lowest, kindest volume. The grandmother, who officially never rests, is resting, upright, eyes closed, hands folded, in the posture of a woman who will deny it later. Flies conduct their parliament in the doorway light and are ignored. Somewhere 2 houses down, someone practices the same 6 notes on a reed pipe, slower and slower, until the pipe itself seems to doze. The shadufs along the ditches have gone quiet. Even the river sounds slower, which it is not. But noon in Egypt persuades everything, even the truth, to lie down for an hour. And on the wall above you, where the light from the high gaps lands, the family's painted decoration glows quietly, lotus and papyrus in red and green, and that blue that Egypt fired out of sand and copper when nothing blue enough existed in nature. And you can lie on your mat and follow the pattern the way the painter meant you to, around and around. The flower, the bud, the flower, the bud, the oldest wallpaper on earth. Designed like everything in this room, like the walls themselves, like the hour itself, to lower the temperature of being alive. The afternoon, when the village stirs again, belongs to the household arts, and the household arts of Egypt are the tour every visitor remembers longest. In the kitchen court, the evening's cooking begins its slow assembly. Fish, always fish, the river's second gift after the soil, mullet and catfish and perch, brought up from the bank this morning, split and grilled over the coals, or salted and dried on the roof racks against leaner days. And Egypt eats fish the way the coastal north eats it, constantly and expertly. Beside it, the vegetables the black land pours out, onions and garlic above all, eaten raw, cooked, and in quantities that amuse foreigners. The workman's rations list them by the basket, then leeks, lettuce, cucumbers, melons, lentils simmering with cumin and coriander. The smells your own century still cooks with, 3,000 years deep. Honey from the temple apiaries for the cakes, dates and figs and pomegranates from the garden trees, and oil. Everywhere oil, pressed here not from the olive but from sesame and other seeds of the valley. And through the kitchen, as through every room, move the household's other residents, and the most important one arrives now, along the wall top, with her tail up, drops soundlessly to the court floor, and assumes her post by the fish. The cat. Egypt and the cat have the longest domestic partnership of any people and any animal after the dog, and it began exactly here, in the granaries and kitchens of the villages, where the wildcats of the valley discovered the mice of the grain stores and the Egyptians discovered the wildcats, and both sides recognized a good arrangement immediately. By this village's day, the cat is family, fed, named, mourned when she dies, adored in exactly the tone your century adores her, and beyond the household, she has become something more, a creature under the protection of the gods themselves, so that harming one is a serious matter indeed, and the lady by the fish knows all of this perfectly well, and conducts herself accordingly, and receives, in due course, and without visibly asking, the tale of the mullet, which was, all along, the entire plan. Late in the afternoon, the lane outside fills with the sound of the small market that gathers by the village gate on rest day eves, and the market of a world without money is a performance worth standing in. Because nothing here is bought. Everything is swapped. And yet, the swapping is not the fumbling guesswork you might imagine, because Egypt long ago invented the thing that makes barter smooth, a unit of account, a measuring stick for value that nobody actually hands over. It is called the deben, a fixed weight of copper, and everything in this market has a price in it. This basket of fish, to deben, that woven mat, 3, the young goat bawling its opinion by the gate, 8, and the deals are then settled in any goods that add up. The fish taken for a jar of honey and a bundle of onions, the mat for grain, the goat, after the negotiation of the century, for a bolt of linen, 2 sacks of emmer, and a debt of beer to be discharged at the wedding, and everyone walks away satisfied, having bought and sold at exact prices in a currency that exists only as an idea. Weighed on scales nobody brought, in metal nobody touched. Your century's economists, reading the village accounts, are quietly delighted by it. Money, it turns out, was an idea for 1,000 years before it was ever a coin. And the idea alone, plus honesty, plus a scribe with a palette to write the debts down, runs this market perfectly well. The haggling itself is the entertainment, conducted in the great Egyptian style, operatic dismay, hands to heaven, prices denounced as robbery of the widow and the orphan, and then, terms agreed, instant total amiability and a shared cup of beer. Because the performance was never anger, it was theater, and both parties would have been insulted by a first offer accepted. The goat changes hands. The beer debt is witnessed. The scribe notes it on a flake of limestone that the desert will keep for 3,000 years, and does keep, which is how you know about the goat. Late afternoon brings the scribe of the village home along the lane with his palette under his arm, and the palette under his arm is one of the levers that moves this whole world. So give it a look as he passes. It is a slim board of wood with 2 wells at one end, one for black ink, one for red, headings and corrections in red, 3,000 years before the rubrics of the monks, and a slot down the middle for his reed pens, and with this one portable object and a lifetime's training, its owner runs the recorded half of the village's existence. The wages, the letters, the contracts, the wills, the attendance registers with their scorpions and their beer. Egypt is the most writing-soaked society of the ancient world, and it writes on 2 surfaces, and the difference between them is the difference between the everyday and the eternal. For the everyday, there is the ostrakhan, which is simply a smooth flake of limestone or a broken piece of pot, the sticky note of the ancient world, free, everywhere underfoot, and the village goes through them by the 1,000 shopping lists, love poems, doodles of the foreman, homework, receipts for 1 donkey, and it is these throwaway scraps, preserved by the 10,000 in the dry rubbish heaps, that let this village speak to your century in its own daily voice. And for the eternal and the official, there is the marvel. Down in the marshes of the delta grows a tall triangular reed, and the Egyptians long ago learned to peel its stem into thin strips, lay the strips side by side, lay a second layer crosswise over the first, press and dry the sheet until the plant's own juices weld it into a smooth, pale, flexible, astonishingly durable writing surface, and to join sheet to sheet into rolls, some of them 100 feet long. The reed is papyrus, and papyrus is Egypt's second great export after grain, shipped in bales to every literate corner of the ancient world for thousands of years, and when the Greeks bought it, they bought the name too. And the name outlived the reed, outlived the rolls, outlived Egypt itself, and settled, worn smooth, onto every sheet your century has ever written on. Paper. You have been saying the name of a Delta Marsh reed your whole life. The scribe turns in at his door, palette under his arm, carrying, in the most literal way, the ancestor of every page. Behind him, at a respectful and resentful distance, comes his son, who has spent the day where the sons of scribes spend it, at school, and whose fingers are inky, and whose expression is universal. The scribal school is the ladder of this whole society, and everyone on the ladder knows it. Egypt runs on records, records run on scribes, and a boy who masters the reed pen is exempt. For life, from the shaduf, the sickle, the brick pit, and the corvée, a fact his teachers remind him of constantly, in a genre of texts, the school's copy for practice, in which the scribal profession is compared at length and smugly with every other trade. The farmer, the texts say, is wearier than words can tell. The fisherman works among crocodiles. The soldier marches over hills with his bread and water on his shoulder, like a donkey's load. But the scribe, the scribe, directs the works of all, and no one directs the scribe. Be a scribe, the texts conclude, that your limbs may be sleek and your hands soft. 3,000 years of homework have been assigned on the strength of that argument, and the boy in the lane, who copied 3 columns of it today with his tongue between his teeth, is not yet entirely persuaded, and will be, the way they all are, the first time he watches the harvest from the shade with a tally board on his knee. School itself is memorization, recitation, and copying, endless copying, onto ostraca and wooden boards with a wipeable coat of plaster, the classics of the language written out until the hand knows them without the head, and the teachers correct in red, and the old copies that survive still carry their corrections. Some patient, some visibly exhausted, and among the surviving lines of one exercise a teacher has written, in the weary red of every teacher in every century, "Do it again." The boy will do it again. And one day, his own son will walk home behind him down this lane with inky fingers, and the ladder will hold, and the records will go on. And that, in a civilization built on continuity, is precisely everyone's idea of a happy ending. As the light begins to slant, the household turns to the evening wash, and Egyptian cleanliness is famous across the ancient world, and earned. Water is carried up warm from the kitchen, and the family washes at the basin in strict rotation, and the soap of this valley is natron, the natural mineral salt harvested from the desert lakes, mixed with oil into a scouring paste that cuts grease and leaves the skin smooth. And the same natron, in this thrifty civilization, cleans the teeth, purifies the temple, preserves the fish on the roof, and will one day have its most famous employment in the embalmer's workshops. One desert salt running the entire economy of purity, from breakfast to eternity. Then the oiling, because in this sun and this dry air, oil is not vanity, it is maintenance, and everyone from the pharaoh to the brick treader anoints daily. The workman's rations include their oil allowance as a line item beside the bread, and skin in Egypt is kept the way tools are kept, supple, protected, and attended to. And then the eyes. The little tubes of coal come out, black galena ground fine and mixed with oil. And everyone, men, women, children, farmers, priests, lines their eyes with the applicator stick, the great almond-eyed look of every Egyptian painting. And it is beauty, certainly. But it is armor first. The coal cuts the ferocious glare off water and desert the way the lampblack under a ballplayer's eyes will 3,000 years from now. It discourages the flies that trouble the eyes of everyone in the valley, and the Egyptians themselves insist it protects against the eye diseases of the marshes, and they prescribe it in their medical papyri as seriously as any drug. And your century's chemists, examining the old recipes, have found the argument more interesting than they expected. Either way, the whole village faces every evening with the same dark-rimmed steady gaze that looks out of every tomb wall in the Great Valley. The official expression of the civilization, calm, lined, and level. And by the time the sun reaches the western cliffs, you are wearing it too. Before supper, the garden asks for a visit, because the garden is the Egyptian idea of paradise, stated in plants, and this house's version, small as it is, states it clearly. Behind the kitchen court, inside the wall, a few careful trees stand around a small rectangular pool, and every element is the dream in miniature. The pool is the river, tamed to a mirror, stocked with a few fish and a blue lotus whose flowers open with the morning and close with the dusk, keeping the day's hours as faithfully as any temple. The date palms are the pantry, sugar, and timber, and rope and shade in one tree. The pomegranate and the fig are the sweetness, and presiding over the whole enclosure, broad and gnarled and generous, is the tree the Egyptians love best and paint most, the sycamore fig, whose deep shade is the household's summer parlor, whose small sweet figs feed the children and the birds in unmanaged abundance, and under whose branches the songs say, the goddess herself pours cool water for the thirsty. To sit under the sycamore by the pool in the late gold light, with the doves working through their 5 soft syllables above you, and the lotus folding for the night on the water, is to sit inside this civilization's entire notion of heaven, which is not clouds and light somewhere else, but this, exactly this. The garden by the water, the shade, the fruit, the doves, forever. The Egyptians looked at eternity and asked it to be an afternoon in the garden, and 3,000 years later, visitors from your century stand in the painted tomb gardens of the Great Valley and understand them without a word of translation. And should anything in this village ail, from a scorpion's opinion to a workman's crushed finger, it goes to the physician, because Egyptian medicine is the most famous in the ancient world and deserves a good part of its fame. The physician of this district trained on the medical papyri, the great scrolls that catalog ailments case by case in the world's first clinical format, examination, diagnosis, and then one of 3 verdicts: an ailment I will treat, an ailment I will contend with, or, honestly and remarkably, an ailment not to be treated, the world's oldest recorded medical humility. His pharmacy is the valley itself, and some of it your century has circled back to with respect. Honey on wounds, which the papyri prescribe constantly, and which genuinely fights infection, as your chemists confirmed 3,000 years late. Willow for aches, copper salts for cleaning, splints and bandaging of a quality the battlefield papyri describe with real sophistication, and set beside the sensible remedies, of course, the spells, recited over the bandage, because in this world, medicine and magic are one profession, and the physician would tell you, not unreasonably, that the patient who believes the spell heals faster, an observation your century rediscovered and named the placebo with less poetry. And Egypt has specialists, which astonishes foreign visitors for the next 1,000 years. Physicians of the eye, physicians of the belly, physicians of the teeth. Each district with its practitioners, the great houses with their own, and the fame of it travels so far that foreign kings will write to pharaohs, in the diplomatic letters your museums now hold, asking to borrow an Egyptian doctor, please, the way one borrows a treasure. Tonight the physician's business is light. One fishhook extracted, one baby admired, one elder's knee wrapped warm, and he closes his box of instruments and his roll of spells and goes home along the lane like everyone else, past the market, through the bread smell, under the first star, a man whose profession is 1,500 years old already, and has, this evening, in this village, absolutely nothing it will not treat. Supper is taken in the court as the heat lifts. Grilled fish and warm bread, lentils and cucumbers, dates and beer. The family cross-legged on mats around the low table. The cat supervising from the wall with her tail curled over her paws. The talk running through the day. The foreman's mood. The flood gossip from the temple. The neighbor's imminent wedding and its catering politics. And when the meal is done and the light has gone amber, the whole village does the thing the whole village does every fine evening. It walks down to the river. The bank at sunset is the village's promenade, its news exchange, and its theater. The fishermen are bringing in the last catch, their narrow papyrus skiffs sliding home through water the color of the sky, which is the color of embers. The ferry crosses with the last workers from the far bank fields. Boys race reed boats they made this afternoon. The herons stalk the shallows with the deliberation of tax assessors. Upstream, a big cargo barge rides at anchor for the night, sail furled, bound for the granaries of the north with the season's wheat, and the boatman's cook fire makes its small orange point on the darkening water. And through it all, north, always north, the river itself slides enormous and unhurried, the whole evening riding on its back, and the people stand on the bank in their white linen, with the sunset on their faces, and watch it the way people watch a fire, which is to say, without needing it to do anything, because it is doing everything already. The Egyptians never worshipped the Nile with quite the fever outsiders expect, and the reason is telling. You do not beg from a giver who has never once failed to give. The river is not their hope. It is their certainty, the one great fixed fact under all the others, and the mood on the bank at evening is not supplication, but something much rarer in the ancient world, and not so common in yours. It is trust. A whole civilization, standing at the water's edge in the cool of the day, entirely unworried about tomorrow, because tomorrow comes down from the south at 3 miles an hour, on schedule, forever. Down at the bank, watch the boats a moment longer, because the river taught Egypt one more trick, and it is the neatest piece of free engineering in the whole valley. The Nile flows north, day and night, forever toward the sea, and the wind of Egypt, with a reliability no other country is granted, blows south, up the valley nearly every day of the year. Think about what that means. A boat going north simply ships its mast and drifts, the current doing the work, the steersman merely steering. A boat going south raises its sail, and the faithful wind carries it upstream against the current, mile after mile, cargo and all. The river is a road that runs both ways at once, downhill by water, uphill by air, and it costs nothing in either direction, and the whole 700-mile country is stitched together by it. The grain barges and the stone barges and the ferries and the little skiffs all riding the two great free engines of Egypt, the current and the wind, in their eternal opposite directions. And the arrangement runs so deep in this civilization that it is built into the writing itself. In the hieroglyphs, the word for traveling north is written with a little boat with its mast down, bare, drifting. The word for traveling south is written with a little boat under full sail. To fare downstream, to fare upstream, drawn exactly as it is done, so that every schoolboy copying his exercises draws the wind and the current without knowing he is drawing them, and 3,000 years later, when your century's scholars finally read the old writing again, there the two little boats still were, sail up, sail down, the entire transport system of an empire, preserved as grammar. The evening ferry crosses below you now, oars out, mast bare, riding the current at its easy angle, and the last light is on the water, and the boatman is singing the pulling song without thinking about it, and the river carries the song north along with everything else. Back at the house in the first lamplight, the sonnet board comes out, and the sonnet board is the Hainafatival of this world. The game every household owns and every generation relearns. It is a rectangle of 30 squares, 3 rows of 10, with a set of pawns for each player and throwing sticks for dice, and the pawns race each other along the winding track, through squares of fortune and squares of hazard. The square of beauty, the square of water, where careless pawns famously drown and must start again. And the game is old beyond memory even now, played in this valley for over 1,000 years already, painted into the tombs, packed into the eternity luggage of kings, and played tonight, on this particular board with its mended corner, by the grandmother and the inky-fingered schoolboy, for the household championship of the evening. And she is letting the game look closer than it is, in the manner of grandmothers across all the boards and all the centuries you have visited, and when his last pawn escapes the water square by an outrageous throw and skips home, and he looks up not quite believing, her face performs its ancient duty of astonishment, and the household applauds, and the cat opens one eye to confirm the noise is not food, and closes it. Then the music, because an Egyptian evening likes a little. The daughter takes down the lute. The aunt has the little frame drum. Someone hums the line. And the songs of this valley are love songs mostly, and harvest songs, and the long river songs with the pull of oars inside their rhythm. And one of the songs, one of the ones everyone knows, is the harper's song, the old sweet melancholy one that the tomb walls quote, which looks at the great monuments of the ancestors and says, gently, and 3,000 years before your century's poets, that no one comes back to tell us how they fare. So spend the day well, follow your heart while you live, put on fine linen, and make holiday, and do not weary of it. A civilization famous for preparing for death, singing by lamplight, the oldest carpe diem on earth. The drum taps, the lute walks its line, the lamps lean. Outside, the river agrees, and when the music folds up and the lamps are pinched down to 1, the family climbs the stairs to the roof, and the sky takes over the evening, and the Egyptian sky is not scenery. It is an institution, and it is keeping 3 kinds of time above you right now. It is keeping the hours, because the Egyptians divided the night by the stars themselves, tracking a chain of 36 chosen star groups, the Decans, whose risings parade across the year, roughly a dozen of them standing watch over any one night. And from that habit of a 12-part night, matched with a 12-part day, comes an arrangement you have lived inside since before you could count. 24 hours. The clock your century wears on its wrist is, at its foundation, a map of this sky, drawn by priests on rooftops like this one, watching stars rise over the eastern cliffs and marking, one by one, the hours of the world's oldest night shift. It is keeping the year, because lo, in the east before dawn, at one precise season, after 70 days of absence, the brightest star in the sky returns. The Egyptians call her Sopdet, your astronomers call her Sirius, and her first dawn rising is the hinge of the entire calendar, for it comes, by the oldest coincidence in the world, just as the river begins to rise, so that the star and the flood arrive together, every year, the herald and the gift, and the priests watch for her the way the whole country watches the Nilometer, and her return is New Year's Day itself, the sky and the river agreeing, once again, to begin. And it is keeping eternity, because turn to the north, above the desert rim, and there they are, the stars this civilization loves best, the ones that wheel around the fixed point of the sky and never dip below the horizon, never set, never die. The imperishable ones, the Egyptians call them, the stars that cannot be extinguished, and the oldest royal prayers ask nothing grander for the soul than this: to go and join them, to become one of the lights that never goes down. Every century of this journey has banked its fire against the dark. Egypt looked up and found the fire that needs no banking, burning above the northern desert. Forever, and lying on your mat beneath them, with the headrest cool under your neck and the whole village breathing on its roofs around you, you can follow the household's oldest logic all the way up. The lamp is out, the hearth is covered, and the imperishable stars are keeping the light on for everyone. And one more gift from this rooftop before sleep, the quietest and largest of them all, because the year those stars are keeping is, in its bones, your year. The Egyptians, needing a calendar steadier than the moon for a country run on a schedule, counted the days between one rising of Sopdet and the next, and built from the count the world's first working civil calendar of 365 days, 12 tidy months of 30 days each, which makes 360, plus 5 extra days added on at the year's end. Outside all the months, the birthdays of the gods, a little festival landing of days that belong to no month at all, when the ordinary rules loosen and the new year gathers itself. 12 months, 365 days. It is not an approximation of your calendar. It is your calendar's direct ancestor, straightened and patched by the Romans, renamed by the emperors, adjusted by a pope, and handed down to your kitchen wall essentially intact, so that every date you have ever written, every birthday you have ever kept, runs on an engine first assembled by floodwatchers on rooftops exactly like this one, counting mornings between one return of the same bright star and the next, day and night in 12s, the year in 365, the very pages one day made of the delta reed. This valley did not just live gracefully, it furnished the house of time itself and left the furniture to everyone who came after and never signed it, and lies here tonight under its own sky, 3,000 years upstream of you, entirely unaware of how much of it you carry, which is, if you weigh it, the most Egyptian gesture there could be. The gift, given like the river gives, without comment, annually, forever. The village settles into the night around you, roof by roof. The last lamps go down the lane like closing eyes. The cooking fires are covered, each under its blanket of ash, 60 small tomorrows banked at once. On the next roof, the neighbor's family talks itself slowly quiet, the words spacing out, the pauses lengthening until only the grandmother's voice is left, saying something short that gets a sleepy laugh, and then nothing. The dog downstairs performs his final circuit of the court, finds it in order, and folds up by the oven's fading warmth with a sigh you could have predicted 4 centuries away. The cat takes the night watch on the walltop, upright, folded, golden-eyed on duty in the manner of cats, which is to say entirely for her own reasons. And the night sounds of the valley assemble themselves into their old arrangement. The frogs along the ditches, a broad, soft, continuous shimmer of sound, the crickets threading through them. Down at the bank, the water slapping the moored skiffs, patient as a metronome. Far out on the river, once, the low call of a boatman to another boat, and the answer, and the quiet again. A jackal, away off in the redland, remarks on the moon, and is not seconded. The palms over the garden turning their fronds against each other, with a sound like slow rain that never lands. And under everything, always, the great smooth northbound slide of the river itself, the sound so constant that the valley no longer hears it, the way you do not hear your own pulse, which is what it is. The breeze off the water arrives in its long, slow intervals, crossing the fields, picking up the green smell, delivering it to the rooftops, moving on. The headrest holds your head in the moving air. The linen sheet, is exactly enough. Above you, the deacons are climbing the east on schedule, the third hour of night presenting itself for duty, and somewhere below the horizon, 70 days into her absence, Sopdet is on her way back, as she always is, and the river, which knows it, is already in mountains no one here will ever see, beginning to gather next year's gift. And before sleep takes you, walk the whole golden day once more, slowly, touching each thing as you pass it and letting it go. The rooftop under the two rivers, the one of water and the one of stars, and the headrest that holds your ear to the cool moving air, the pillow this valley never saw a reason to improve. Let it go. The black land and the red land lying side by side, the living thread and the eternal desert, one footstep apart, every day, forever. Let them go. The mud brick drinking the day and breathing it back at night, the one-day thermal tide with no moving parts, and the plain word for brick that rode its own name around the world and came home as adobe. Let it go. The grandmother breathing the coals awake in the blue dark, 4 decades of mornings behind her hands, the treasury of the whole village minted fresh each morning in bread and beer. Let her go. The truth told straight, the paid builders with their rations and their proud graffiti, and the shadow at the table named anyway, both held in the same steady hand. Let it go. The workmen strolling their desert commute, the 10-day week with its 2-day rest, and the attendance registers with their scorpions and their brewing days, the personal day, invented, filed, and reseated 33 centuries early. Let them go. The shaduf rocking at the ditch like a patient waiting bird, the counterweight doing the lifting, the river persuaded politely uphill, a bucketful at a time. Let it go. The 3 seasons, flood, green, gold, the soil replaced annually, free, and the whole nation's year read off a staircase descending into the river. Let them go. The flax in blue flower, the spindle turning its oldest thread in new fibers, and the linen woven so fine the records called it woven air. Let it go. The scribe's palette with its black and its red, the sticky notes of limestone, and the delta reed whose name outlived its own empire and settled onto every page's paper. Let them go. The schoolboy's inky fingers, the satire of the trades, the teacher's weary red do it again, and the ladder that holds. Let them go. The natron and the oil and the level dark-rimmed gaze of the whole civilization. Armor first, beauty second, calm, always. Let it go. The market where money was an idea for 1,000 years before it was a coin. The operatic dismay, the goat, the beer debt witnessed on limestone that the desert kept. Let them go. The physician's 3 honest verdicts, the honey on the wound 3,000 years early, and the foreign kings writing to borrow a doctor the way one borrows a treasure. Let him go. The road that runs both ways at once, downhill by water, uphill by air, and the 2 little boats preserved as grammar. Sail up, sail down, an empire's whole transport drawn into its own alphabet. Let them go. The garden by the pool, the lotus keeping the hours, the sycamore's deep shade where eternity was asked to be an afternoon, and understood. Let it go. The village on the bank at sunset in its white linen, watching the river the way people watch a fire, the rarest mood of the ancient world, trust. Let it go. The Senate pawn escaping the water square by an outrageous throw, the grandmother's astonishment performing its ancient duty, and the harper's old sweet song, spend the day well, follow your heart, put on fine linen, and do not weary of it. Let them go. The deacons climbing the east in their watches, the 24 hours your wrist still wears, Sopdet on her way back with the flood in her train, and the 365 days on your kitchen wall, assembled on rooftops exactly like this one, and never signed. let them go. And the imperishable stars over the northern desert, the ones that never set, never dip, never die, the fire that needs no banking, keeping the light on for everyone. Let it all go. It is all still there. That is the deepest promise this valley knows how to make, and it has kept it longer than anyone. The river is rising in mountains no one has seen, on schedule. The star is 70 days into her round trip, on schedule. The mud brick is breathing out the afternoon. The coals are under the ash. The cat has the watch, and the oldest clock on earth is running sweetly in the dark half a mile away, wanting absolutely nothing from you. So your hands can let go of the day. Your shoulders can let go of the day. And your thoughts can climb the stairs to the roof now too, and find their mat among all the others, and lie back under the river of stars, with the cool air moving beneath them. One last thing, and it is the oldest reassurance in the world, and this valley wrote it first. Everything that watched over tonight has done this before, not dozens of times, not centuries of times. The river below has made tonight's exact quiet journey past sleeping villages every night for longer than there have been villages. The stars overhead were the same stars in the same watches over the builders of the pyramids, who were already ancient history to the family sleeping on the next roof. The bread was banked, the door was barred, the cat took the wall 1,000 years before tonight, and 1,000 years after, identically. And the whole deep stack of those identical nights is under you now like a mattress of time, and it has never once failed to reach morning. The coals are covered. The star is coming back. The river is running north at 3 miles an hour, on schedule forever. And the imperishable stars are burning over the red land, unbanked, untrimmed, unwearied, the night watch that has never needed relieving. Sleep now, the way this valley has always slept, on its back, under everything, in perfect trust. Good night.